Biden recently had pitched an idea that Democrats are the saviors for the U.S. economy ahead of the midterm elections. He basically received criticism from the Republicans because of that, but Biden warns, as bleak as it seems now, that Republicans' control of Congress would make the economy much worse. On his recent visit to a family farm in rural Illinois, thousands of miles away from the front lines of the grinding war that we're witnessing in Ukraine, President Joe Biden lashed out at his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin, blaming him for destabilizing global food supplies and driving up the cost of groceries at home. Russia's assault on Ukraine, President Biden explained after a tour of the farm's fields and grain bins, it has been dramatically reduced food exports from the warring nations that together supply more than a quarter of the world's wheat, causing the food prices to spiral out of control. Now, right now, America is fighting on two fronts. President Biden said, at home, we're seeing the record high inflation and rising food prices and gas costs. Abroad, it's helping Ukrainians defend their democracy and feeding those who are left hungry around the world because of Russia's invasion. With less than 6 months before the midterm congressional elections, President Biden is talking about the economy a lot. This is going to be the top issue on every voter's mind, and it's a worrying point for the Democrats. One of the biggest political liabilities for the President Joe Biden and his party. Despite a streak of steady job growth and low unemployment, Americans are deeply what they call pessimistic about the state of the economy and the direction it's heading in. Inflation, running at nearly its fastest rate in 4 decades, has become inescapable. Gas prices have surged to record highs as many families struggle to afford the basic necessities like food and rent. Now the economists are warning of possible recession. Compounding matters, a shortage of baby formula has left parents in one of the world's wealthiest countries scrounging around to feed their infant kids. Amid the national tumult over the economy, Biden's approval ratings have President Biden's approval ratings have fallen sharply, dipping to the lowest point of his presidency, 39%, which is about where Trump had hovered at. The visit to the Illinois farm was part of a wider effort by the White House, basically, to reset the narrative around the economy after months of unyielding criticism from Republicans who have used inflation as a political cudgel against President Biden. In recent days, President Biden has sought to tell a textured story about the economy, one that concludes with a sharp warning that, as bleak as it can seem now, the alternative, Republicans getting control of the Congress, would make it much, much worse. In his telling, the administration pulled the nation back from the brink of an economic catastrophe with a massive stimulus bill and mass vaccination campaign that saved plenty of lives and livelihoods during the depths of the pandemic. 2 years on, there's still much more to do. Naming inflation as his top domestic priority, Biden has touted the administration's efforts to put the economy on a sturdier path by strengthening the nation's supply chains, cracking down on price gouging, and releasing oil from the strategic reserve. Now under mounting pressure in recent weeks, he invoked the Defense Production Act to ramp up baby formula production, and he launched Operation Fly Formula to rush shipments into the U.S. from overseas. Yet, those actions, he charged, are being undermined by Putin's aggression in Ukraine, which has sent fuel and food prices soaring. New COVID-19 lockdowns in China that are straining supply chains anew. The alleged price gouging by oil companies and an ultra-maggot Republican Party intent on obstructing President Biden at every fucking turn. President Biden understands, and he says that he understands America's frustration with the rising cost and the slow pace of progress in Washington. So deeply, in fact, he could taste it, but re-electing Republicans, he argued, would not ease their troubles at all. Americans have a choice right now between two paths, reflecting two different sets of values, Biden said. He basically said that the Republican Party, still in the thrall of Donald Trump, had no serious plan to tackle inflation, and they were instead more focused on fighting issues such as banning textbooks from classrooms, which is not an important issue right now. In a press release, the Republican National Committee accused President Biden of being desperate to blame anyone but himself for the worst inflation in 40 years, and he has nothing to do with the inflation. But it added that American people know that he is responsible. No, it's not. But for Democrats who hold narrow majorities in both chambers of Congress, are asking voters for 2 more years of unified government in Washington, at a risk that Biden himself acknowledged. Voters historically punished the president's party, usually in the midterms. And this cycle, Democrats have struggled to energize their base, deflated over the party's failure to pass Biden's sweeping agenda, designed to remedy long-standing economic challenges and at the same time, Democrats are struggling to persuade independent and moderate Republican voters who recoiled from Donald Trump in 2018 and 2020. Whether Democrats can change the voters' attitudes on the economy weighs heavily on their prospects. Now, public opinion surveys have constantly found that voters have more trust in Republicans to handle the economy and inflation than Democrats, which is wrong. But a recent ABC News Washington Post poll found that only 28% of Americans approved of the job Biden was doing to tackle inflation, while 68% disapproved. The same poll showed that 50% of Americans believed that Republicans were better able to handle the economy. No, they're not. Just 36% agreed that the Democrats were better on it. The political headwinds against them, Democrats believe that they have found an opening that will undercut the Republicans' advantage. Now, a plan written by Senator Rick Scott of Florida, the chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, would require all Americans to pay some income tax, including families that don't earn enough to owe tax money, and would require Congress to reauthorize all federal legislation every 5 years. President Biden recently used his bully pulpit to elevate Scott's 11-point plan to rescue America, which he attacked as an extreme vision for the country. Many Republicans, including Senate Minority Leader Moscow Mitch, have distanced themselves from this proposal, downplaying the disagreement. The White House said it was the only comprehensive plan Republicans have put forward for the midterm election, and this is not the last that you've heard from us about Chairman Scott's tax plan that will raise taxes. Jen Psaki, this is what Jen Psaki had said in her last week as White House press secretary. In a withering response, Scott called President Joe Biden unfit for office and challenged him to a debate. If you want to talk about somebody that was unfit for squatter or office, look at Donald Trump. Joe Biden can put blame on anyone all he wants to. Now the Florida Senate said, but here's the truth: Joe Biden is the president of the United States. Democrats control the House and Representatives and the Senate. Democrats' agenda is hurting American families, and no amount of spin can change it. Technically, you got that wrong. Republicans' agenda is hurting American families. A polling memo by Navigator Research, a Democratic messaging group, underscores why the party is seizing on Scott's plan. If it found that the proposal, when described as a plan that would raise taxes on millions of working-class families and potentially threaten the entitlement programs like Social Security and Medicare, and it was deeply unpopular, even among many Republican voters. And when contrasted with the Democrats' economic agenda, the voters' view of President Biden and his party and the economy improved. Isaiah Bailey, an advisor to Navigator Research, said that it was incumbent on Democrats to make voters aware of these dueling visions for the country. The unpopular positions are only politically meaningful when they permeate the public consciousness, Bailey said. He also added that Democrats must demonstrate that they are trying to deliver on their promises, even in the face of the Republican opposition and procedural challenges like the filibuster. Democrats need to look like fighters, not like pussies, he said. Maria Cardona, who's a veteran Democratic strategist. Oh, shit, sorry. My phone just fell over for a second there. Sorry about that. Maria Cardona, a veteran Democratic strategist who has urged her party's leaders to talk more about the economy with more urgency and empathy, agreed with this. It's for way too long, Republicans have gotten away with blaming Democrats and pointing the finger and talking about Biden's policies, she said. But with so much at stake this fall, including the push to ban abortion if the Supreme Court overturns Roe v. Wade, as is expected to do, Cardona said it's imperative that Democrats draw a clear contrast with the oppositional party. There's no question in my goddamn mind that we are not taking advantage of the moment in time. When handing over control of Congress to the Republican Party, this is going to be way more dangerous for the future of our democracy and for the well-being of our citizenship than it has been in at least a generation. Now, surveys suggest that voters broadly understand and support the decision to impose sanctions on Russia, even if there are consequences for their pocketbooks. And many cite the ongoing pandemic as a leading cause of the nation's economic woes. Yet there are signs dissatisfaction with the president's economic leadership is hardening. It does not blunt their desire to have you produce a solution, said Patrick Gaspard, who's the president and chief executive of the Center for American Progress think tank in Washington. They are clear on what the causation is, but also clear that they want this president and this Congress to solve that problem. The president's ability to tackle inflation is limited. The power of inflation largely rests on the Federal Reserve. Now, Wendy Edelberg, director of the Hamilton Project and a senior fellow in economic studies at the Brookings Institution, said that there are indications that the president's efforts to shore up the nation's supply chains are taking root. One of the best steps the White House can take, she said, is not to create additional hurdles for any monetary policymakers. Let the monetary policy run its course. Adding that on that front, she believes that they're doing the right things right now. Aiming to cool the economy, the central bank recently approved the sharpest rise in interest rates in more than 20 years. Jerome Powell, fresh from being confirmed by the Senate for a second term as chairman of the Federal Reserve, had acknowledged the challenge of attempting to control inflation without tipping the economy into a recession. Now, ahead of Biden's visit to Illinois, the White House received a dash of good news in an otherwise discouraging report. Inflation slowed for the first time in months, though the annual rate remained high. But speaking at a fundraiser in Chicago later that day, President Biden acknowledged the difficulty of the task ahead. This is going to be hard because inflation is going to scare the living hell out of fucking everybody, he said. We have a problem we have to fucking deal with. In the meantime, we can't take our eye off of that, because take our eye off all that could happen if we do not prevail. So, if you like the video, you can give the video a like and subscribe to my channel, RBW King. You can also hit the notification bell so that you'll be notified when a new video comes out. And if you want to support my work even further, you can donate to my Patreon link, which you can find in the About section of YouTube. And for just a little as a few bucks a month, your donation can help go a long way, and thanks for listening.